I don't even know which way to turn anything. Hey everyone, I'm Madonna. This is David. And a little bit excited about the new Surgeon General in America and hoping that some of the common sense might actually make its way over to Australia.
Hmm.
So the new Surgeon General is Dr. Casey Means. She has a strong focus on lifestyle and dietary factors in health. She believes that many modern ailments stem from preventable lifestyle conditions and advocates for more nutritious foods in schools. What a concept.
Mm.
So anyway,
Well, I think that's something that a lot of counsellors would be okay with,
yeah, absolutely.
because a lot of the stuff we deal with lifestyle
Yeah.
and obviously medicine's are only for doctors, and so a lot of that type of stuff there's well-founded research on its effectiveness.
Yeah. So let's just play a little clip I've got from her with, I'm hopeful. Look, she might not be the bee's knees for everyone, but I'm actually really hopeful. So let's hope she's a good human being
Well,
who
everyone
does have.
tries. It's like when you've got a problem, we try to solve it, and then, we're dealing with obviously forces that are bigger.
Yeah,
And so, and also, even if you come up with the perfect idea, it mightn't solve the problem
absolutely.
if you just got it in words.
So let's have a look at this.
Medication that reverses diabetes. There's no medication that reverses heart disease. There's no medication that reverses Alzheimer's dementia. There's no medication that actually generates health. Only diet and lifestyle strategies generate health. And so that should obviously be the foundation of our medical system. But unfortunately, we're not very well trained as physicians to know that information or to coach on it.
Well, I agree with that. This is what people have been coming to me for 30 years and saying. They say to me when I go through lifestyle factors and all sorts of things like, Teflon in the home and plastics and BPAs and, even the fillers in a lot of supplements and, the chemicals in our foods and the numbers and the dyes and, and then people say, why don't my doctors tell me? No,
Well,
because your doctors are trained to give you medications and to do surgery. That's what your doctors are trained to do.
hmm. Well, so another angle where this type of issue comes up in counselling is that there's things like for example, often things like the diseases that you mentioned there. What were they? Heart disease.
Alzheimer's, diabetes.
She didn't mention cancer. But the thing is that
She might not be allowed to.
sure, sure. Except so she's saying that basically no medication that can cure these things or reverse them. And then she says that lifestyle things can improve them. Now, what we know in psychology from the ACE studies, the adverse childhood experiences, which I do bring up often because the fact is that different types of trauma in your childhood, whether it be abuse of different types or whether it be neglect of different types, or even things like if your parents divorce or you have a family member in jail.
Or there's a medical intervention that, causes trauma.
Well, whatever it is, it's like they've been able to find that the more of these problems, the more they scale out into severe medical conditions later in life.
Yeah.
And of course, then we've got a lot of variables like, because they're risk factors. Okay, but we have protective factors too. So people, even though they might have a lot of difficulty in their childhood, they might have a lot of really good things. Like one thing, people with money, they can afford to pay to go see a good counselor or whatever they need. So money can be a protective factor. Other protective factors are good information. People might be really smart and therefore be able to support their own situation. Even though it's bad, they can make it better.
Yes.
So many ways. And so we know that. But we also know that a lot of the, not only precursors, but things that make these conditions worse are things like stress in adult life.
Yeah.
Right? So things like heart disease, that's one of the main things that keeps it getting worse. Right? And so it doesn't matter how many drugs you take, that's not going to stop the stress. Like even when you take antidepressants, they do one thing. Like because I've tried them, and we've all experimented with different things, and they don't, they numb things down and this or that, but they don't necessarily address the condition that's causing the stress. And sometimes that might be your job. It might be work. You can't leave your job because you're paying off a mortgage, you've got kids and that, so you have to stay in there with the stress. But still, as she said, it's the environmental factors. You can improve your diet. You can do more exercise. You can do because, like for example, until I damaged my knee, I used to go running 3 times a week. And, I'm not a long distance runner, but, I'd do 2 kilometers run with hills on them. And when I did that, I'd have no depression. And it could just tear it up. Or things like anxiety, they just don't exist if you can do a little bit of heart pumping, because it releases endorphins, endocannabinoids naturally. And so it's true.
Exercise releases endocannabinoids.
Yeah, depending on what type. Look it up.
Because did I tell you, or did you
all
hear
the types of pain and natural opioids they release as
well.
well.
The matured hops bitter extracts stimulate the cannabinoid pathways as well.
Right, but exercise can do it without any type of supplement at all. You just have to rip into it and be disciplined and do it regularly. Anyway, but so from especially a holistic counselling perspective, what that lady's saying is actually completely true. And even though we can't, even as a counsellor, reverse things, there's a lot you can do to give support to reduce the stress or reduce other conditions that are just by. Another thing we do, make sure people are doing enough activities to get their hormones working, their dopamine, their serotonin, and all the positive hormones.
Yeah.
And that's not very hard to look up online, seeing what makes these things. And it might be making art, for example, if you want to increase oxytocin, hug your partner, hug your pets, make art, make music, or just listen to it, enjoy it.
Make love, not war.
Or, yeah, make love.
All the important things. Not too much sacrifice.
I think war is worse for the heart conditions.
Probably a little bit. I've got a friend who's been he's an Israeli, and so he's been sitting over there the last few years, and occasionally he jumps on a science Zoom that I'm part of. It's always good to see he's alive. But he's pretty exhausted from the whole thing. It's pretty awful.
Well, war is
and hell. He's fully aware of the whole military-industrial complex pushing the whole thing.
Well, sort of more or less most people are a little bit aware of it these days.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's
who's that American president that talked about it? Eisenhower. He did a whole lecture on it before he left, and so with that, that's addressing it from a counselor. What about from a naturopathic point of view?
Yeah, so obviously so many things go into what we look at, so like I'll tell you a little story about anxiety. So I had a client years and years and years ago, and I'm sure I've talked about this one before, but she knew that wheat made her fat. That's all she knew, and that's all she cared about. Wheat made her fat. And she had one friend, so there were 4 couples, and they would all take turns every week cooking a meal. So it was her turn once a month, and one of her friends was always sabotaging her, perhaps subconsciously, but always sabotaged her because she always had lots of wheat.
People are annoyed that people won't be normal. And if it's not normal, you'll tend to get punishment from society, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, right. Well, it didn't occur to us until about maybe the 3rd month in a row on a Tuesday after her friend, let's call her Marianne. Anyway, so she would have these panic attacks about 48 hours after a big wheat meal. And that's when we realized that wheat just wasn't inflammatory for her, but it was inflammatory for her brain.
Right.
So now whether or not...
I don't eat wheat very much because it makes me go to sleep.
Yeah, right.
Especially if I eat in the afternoon, I just fall asleep.
Well, that's a lack of the DAO. So diamine oxidase is a enzyme we need in the gut to help to break down the gliadin in wheat. And if we don't have enough gliadin, then we don't break down the wheat into tiny little molecules to leave the gut. And therefore our liver has to jump on in and do the job that our gut should have done. And then it can become a gliadin opioid.
Right.
So when we eat wheat or dairy and we fall asleep, we actually use it to fall asleep. It's because we've created natural opioids in our body that make us tired. And that's why a lot of kids who have neurodiverse brains, it's why they get addicted to bad food like, white bread and cheese, because it calms their brain.
Well, if you get a bit of insomnia, there's nothing like having a sandwich and being able to fall asleep.
I had a client in yesterday, and if you're there, hello, she was saying that she wasn't sleeping very well, so she had a couple of little glasses of port, and that normally works. Then she's up making Milo at 2:00 in the morning, and that didn't work.
No,
anyway,
you need the port.
Well, the port, none of it
the
worked.
Port wasn't working.
No, that's why she ended up having Milo. Anyway, it was pretty funny.
Insomnia is another thing that prescriptions get thrown out for, and because I've tried that too. I don't know. remember what type it was, but it didn't really help me sleep.
No.
Any more than something like melatonin, and the side effects of the next day are pretty devastating.
Well, the side effects
your brain's
overall,
almost disabled.
but long term, the antidepressants, anti-anxieties, and sleeping drugs all lead to, things like Alzheimer's and dementia because they suffocate the brain.
Well, I never took the sleeping pills for more than 3 days in a row, and probably a total of 10 times, and I didn't use them anymore.
Yeah.
Because they were I'd go to work and I'd make really big mistakes, and I didn't make mistakes.
Yeah, right. So, interesting.
Yeah, like not banking things or invoicing wrong. Yeah, they had a bigger, so I don't take them. But melatonin seems to click in just as much.
Yeah. What dose do you take? 1, 3, 5, 10, 20?
Depends. But the thing is that it's the same with this conversation. It doesn't fix the underlying thing, which you can't sleep, which is usually circular thinking. And so that's something we deal with in counselling, because if you can't get things off your mind, you really need to do something. You need to, because it means something unresolved. And so generally the pattern with people and the researchers, they'll wake up at like 2 or 3 in the morning and they're solving problems, which isn't what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah, well, our government isn't solving any problems at 2 o'clock in the morning or at any time. But anyway, no, so there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, which is underneath the brainstem. You know about the RAS?
Yeah, I get a hammer and whack it in the middle of the night. Straight out.
So the reticular activating system, it's involved in deciding what hormones your body is going to release on a moment-by-moment basis, depending on what trauma and stress you've got going on.
And coming from back here.
Yeah, so the rear of the brain.
So the conscious brain has no control.
Oh, no, the conscious brain is totally fast asleep when this is going on.
So we can't pick our way out of that one.
No, that's right. And this is where people have nightmares and terrors. So one of my clients, again, sort of can go back to the trauma of a time when she had medical malpractice against her, and she just has that circular thinking going over and over again when she can't sleep.
Yeah, because you're trying to solve the problem. Because what's happening in that, it's really, because I've had it in the past, it's like you're trying to solve a problem and you're thinking, if only I said this thing, they'd understand me. If only I could justify it in this way, they'd actually listen to me. But they're not going to listen because they already didn't.
Yeah. And quite often, yeah, that's right. Exactly. So yeah, so I'm very, very hopeful for
although sometimes you do work it out and you'll write it down and you do get an answer in the middle of the night, rarely.
Yes. So I'm sort of loving the concept. Like, we are so far behind here in Australia. We have no one in the medical industry.
But that lady's just been elected. They were far behind before.
Yeah. And I'm fully aware it's all connected with Bobby Kennedy.
What's happening over there is it's a bit groundbreaking, and there's a lot of good people everywhere that are looking into it, because it's become, like, the internet's fueled a lot of things where information's become a lot more easily available so that people can understand. Like, a lot of people are saying the internet's killing everyone. Oh, it's driving them crazy. It's not. Actually, people are getting really good health solutions, looking up online and finding out stuff, and becoming more aware of how the body and how all the different parts of it work. Because there's so much good information online.
There is.
You can really educate yourself up, not on a professional level, but on a level where you can know a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And to help not only you, but the rest of your family with their health.
Exactly. Like, imagine if the whole family in the morning, got some sunshine, ate a healthy breakfast. I was chatting to
a lot of people do that.
A lot of people don't.
Oh, well.
We're 60% overweight in Australia. So, that's a lot of people who aren't doing, they've got reasons for not being able to do it.
60% insecure attachment in relationships too.
Insecure
attachment in relationships. Like, secure attachment is what we want, and that's declining.
Yeah,
that's declining, and narcissism's going up. But that could be from disorganized attachment of the child in your childhood.
Yeah, definitely.
Can go into that if it's not checked.
Well, yes, absolutely. We were listening to that little Jordan Peterson thing that was talking about if kids don't learn how to play at 2 to 4 years old, and you can imagine, because most people are, people, in the over 50s club, most people had siblings. Right. So basically, when you've got siblings, you're working out how to manipulate things so that you get to play and you get to join in with things. And these days, so many people, like, what do we have on average in Australia? Like 1.1 or 1.2 children per family.
Well, I've got three, and they're all spread apart, and they just fight with each other. And they don't like if you have them close together, it's good to have siblings. But when they're 6 or 9 years apart, it's kind of like they don't really.
Now you need to do an Elon and have 13 kids.
Oh, right.
Oh, I used to joke.
Well, he's competitive.
He is. He certainly is. Anyway, so
Yeah, so something that I notice what you do, and I think it's something that is important in all holistic management, whether it be counselling or naturopathy, or even there's more holistic doctors. What do they call themselves now?
integrative medicine doctors
Yeah,
or functional medicine
yeah. So
doctors.
there's more of that coming around, and the main difference is because there's an argument about this saying like these diseases like heart disease or cancer that no one can do anything to improve them. But the problem with that is that's only if you look at the symptoms. Whereas in naturopathy, it's always been had a more of a causal relationship. And so when you look at the cause of these underlying things, just like we mentioned before, which is a really easy one to pick out, that stress can increase your blood sugar, can increase the cancer symptoms, can increase the heart disease. And so when you're looking at the cause, it's actually the stress is the cause, right?
Yeah, right.
And then you have stress, and what happens when you stress? Well, you binge eat, right? And so now we've got another problem. And so if you look at just say I'm not saying there's the case, but in a case where anyone has one of these conditions and there's a major stress component, you go, oh, we've got stress, now we've got a bad diet.
Yeah.
Right now we've got a bad mood.
Yeah.
Right. So you've got all of these things, and when you start looking more at the causal elements and get underneath it, well, you're maybe not reversing the condition, but you're sure doing a lot to make it go slower.
Yeah,
Because the
right.
thing is, these things, if the stress increases, can speed up very quickly.
Yes.
Just like some conditions can make some conditions become onset and then rapidly people deteriorate. Whereas if you can get support, you can at least make them slow down.
Yes.
And you can slow down. Plus, you can work on the underlying causes. And there's a lot of cases where things that they say can't be cured, and maybe it's not in the mainstream, but in a minority of cases where they get it right, some things that they say can't be reversed end up being like a lot of. You're not allowed to talk about it online very much, but we all know some people have had cancer and they've just been sent home, and then they find a range of different things to do, and it's somehow resolved.
Well, really
And that's
interesting.
becoming a more common story.
Yeah, one of my aunts, she was diagnosed with breast cancer about, I don't know, 25 years ago. And she did a range of things. She did some juice fasting. She did vegetarian. She did juice fasting. She did enemas. She did a whole bunch of things. She got rechecked a little while later. There was no sign of it. And of course, they said to her, we must have misdiagnosed it.
Right.
There's no way you would be alive if you'd had breast cancer because you didn't follow our thing. So, and to this day, she's irritated by that because she thinks, well, I didn't treat it the normal way, and I'm still here, and I never, you know.
And because another problem with because of the way people look at this, there's a lot of alternative ways of doing things. Because basically, the way studies work these days, it costs millions of dollars to do a study because of all the things that you have to do. So it really means it's not a lot of things are proven. It's just that you can't afford to study a lot of things.
True.
And so therefore things don't get studied.
And that's what Bobby Kennedy keeps saying every time anyone says to him, well, what about, this or that? And he goes, there's been no studies. Right. So, and then of course, people like the CDC say to him, well, you're not recommending such and such. And he goes, well, that's your fault because for 40 years you've had the trillions of dollars. You haven't done the studies and you haven't made Americans healthier again.
Because you mentioned Jordan Peterson before.
Yes.
And he went through one thing way back before he became famous, and he was talking about the cost of studies.
Yes.
And because they've made all of these things, the studies become so expensive that people can't really afford to do them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so these days you'll see more things like you'll see like an online thing on Facebook or something, and they survey people and they get more qualitative studies done.
Yeah.
And they don't go into the mainstream, but the people who know can find out.
Yeah.
What sort of things. It's like the things with side effects. People are in denial about side effects.
Yeah.
With drugs or maybe some, because any type of treatment may have a side effect just because of human error.
Whether it's anesthetics or vaccines.
Yeah, or even counselling or something.
Or,
anyone can make a mistake. So there might be side effects.
So I was going to also mention, just because we're talking lifestyle and preventative measures and the sort of thing that hopefully is going to start spreading around the world, as a concept for health. There's a guy
don't forget, it already has been for a long time and it's been growing.
Well, not mainstream enough. Not mainstream enough.
But the information online is growing. Like there's a lot of new treatments that weren't being used before that are now being used because they're online. And you know as well as I do that when you go to buy some products, they're not available as soon as somebody mentions them on a podcast.
Yeah.
And suddenly the suppliers here are out of stock.
So
I'm saying that what I'm saying is this has been building, and even though it's a frustrating thing, it's been building over time because I've been watching it because I used to run a design business serving naturopaths and alternative therapists, and I know where they were back then and I know where it is now.
Yeah. So there's a guy called Dr. Dale Bredesen, and he has an Alzheimer's clinic in California, I think.
Right.
And going back about 10, 15, 20 years ago, I don't know when he started it, but he basically started looking at a person as a whole, what a concept, and saying, okay, so this person beside me, let's do a whole bunch of bloods. Let's look at toxicities and enzyme pathways and genetics and lifestyle factors and see why you have Alzheimer's. And then he would make a list and he would say, okay, so out of this 20 things that we've got that we can improve on, what are 3 things that you can improve in the next month?
Mm-hmm.
And so it might be walking 1 kilometer a day. It might be 20 minutes of sunshine twice a day. It might be drinking that 2 liters of filtered, purified water with Celtic sea salt in it every day. And then they would come back in a month. And what he started doing was reversing Alzheimer's.
Mm.
And so the main factors that he used were things like, looking at metabolic health, making sure the metabolism's functioning. Where are people's energy, heart disease, blood sugar levels, blood pressure, looking at those core levels of things, utilizing intermittent fasting. We know that there's something called BDNI, so brain neurotropic. There's basically some little nerves that regrow in the brain after a certain amount of hours of fasting.
What's that Alzheimer's? That's the one where you don't remember.
Alzheimer's, yeah. Alzheimer's disease. And well, kids are getting it these days, scarily enough, because of the aluminium that they're getting in their brains.
Well, I'm getting just from being a bit old.
Exercise and sleep, and again, I'm the first to put my hand up and say, I try all sorts of things for sleep. Sometimes I go through good patches and I know some things that, do help me a bit. I'm trying the CBD at the moment, as you know, trying it at the right time of day so I don't, feel stoned during clients. Toxicity can plug up any
CBD
pathway.
Doesn't make you stoned. It's only the one with
but I accidentally did THC at lunchtime. And I had 4 clients that afternoon, so I was a bit tired. Anyway, I was sort of trying not to yawn all afternoon as clients were telling me their deepest, darkest secrets. But yeah, so toxins, and funnily enough, CBD, cannabinoids, and including the exercise and anything that stimulates cannabinoids, they open up detox pathways. So,
you can
reducing
do some breath work to release those too. You can look it up online.
Yeah, we release a lot of toxins through our breath and our skin, skin brushing every day.
You can do specific breath work to produce what's that one? The
nitric
cannabinoids.
Oxide. The cannabinoids, yep.
Nitric oxide, or what's the one that they get in DMT? You can produce that too. And I did that type of breathing for a while. It makes you a bit high. Another interesting thing they found, because looking at this whole thing, when they did the ACE studies, the adverse childhood, they were working because they found that trauma was underlying with a lot of drug addiction, a lot of overeating.
Right.
And they found childhood problems. And what they found was the question that they thought doctors might ask that would be helpful was, what happened to you?
Yeah, right.
Right, because when you take these long-term conditions and you're like, what happened to you? Because people want to say, well, what's the causal thing? The causal thing's what happened to the person over time, where they ended up in this condition where their body's so stressed that it's sort of killing itself.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's like, what happened to you? And the problem is working out those old childhood traumas are expensive, counselling's expensive, but there's a lot online, but a good therapist might be able to just work out a little mantra to get it going.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of info online that you can, there's so much online how to do yoga and specific yoga for particular things. It's really straightforward. It's not rocket science, and all the studies show improvement, the same as exercise.
Yeah.
Those two things. So exercise, if you've hurt your body, you can still do a lot of types of yoga. Even like I can't run anymore, but I can do yoga and I can ride my bike.
You're doing a dark cacao to stimulate your stem cells?
Yep.
Yep. Not too often. It's also got oxalates, but
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I get the 90% chocolate.
yeah, that's got the most oxalates.
Yeah.
I think it's got 475 milligrams per gram or
That
something.
doesn't seem to affect me. I feel pretty good.
Yeah. Good. Except for your knees,
Yeah, but
which, oxalates can screw up.
yeah, I've got the X-ray to show that it's not oxalate.
You have no idea. You haven't listened to the oxalate stuff.
Yeah.
So it can destroy joints. It is a big factor in joints. So anyway, it is one of those things that, if you don't know, you don't know. So, but anyway, I'm excited that someone in that sort of position is going to be talking about health and well-being and protective factors and environmental factors and
we'll
lifestyle and dietary factors.
We'll see how we go, because what's happening in the US is really quite experimental, and it's interesting to watch. Although I'm always quite happy being here in the land of Oz, because there's something nice about being here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very unhappy with the political state of affairs at the moment, but it's all good.
Politics, but there's a lot of good social.
Well, everything's political these days.
Well,
everything's
not
political.
In my world,
well,
necessarily.
I'll bet it is, and you're not even aware of it.
No, the thing is that Aussies are really funny. Really funny.
Yeah. Not all of them.
Yeah.
I know some clients with no freaking sense of humor, but that's okay.
Oh, I know there's those people.
But that's their little pathway. So there's these areas called integrative areas in their brain. So there's the Broca's, the Wernicke's, the auditory integration points, and the rip and lip. And the auditory integration point, when you hear something, your brain hears it logically and creatively. And if you can't meld the two of them together, you can't actually read between the lines. So when we've got a disconnected corpus callosum, which connects the two halves of the brain, easy fix for that is holding your hands on your forehead. And maybe I've had technical issues today all day with the computers.
You've had serious technical
issues have been going on all day. So, I should have been having my hand on my forehead all day to bring the frontal cortex energy back. Funnily enough, I used David to muscle test what supplement I needed. And it was Oclear, which indicates xenoestrogens building up in my body, which was converting my estrogen into testosterone, making me a cranky bitch. So,
is that what it was?
Yeah, so that's why the xenoestrogens show. Yeah, so that's why I needed the Oclear, which is pretty amusing. Anyway, so yeah, let's hope it's the start of something good, because Australia follows America.
Well, it's good in your small circle where, with causal healers, it's just a good thing, because there's so many things that are underlying in our health that if we can fix, we might be able to cure a bad disease completely, but you could sure make a nicer lifestyle, and you can slow those things down.
And maybe lower the medications people are on that are causing other problems.
Well, especially if they're on long term, because my view has always been medications are for short term to make a correction.
Yeah.
Right. And so they should be kept at that, and then see, because the longer term you're on them, the harder it is to give up anything.
Yeah.
Because it becomes a part of your whole life. And if you're on something for 10 years, getting off it's going to be hard, and probably getting it on, like with ADHD, like all the, they recommend stimulants and this stuff, but these days they recommend just try it for 12 to 18 months and no more, especially with kids, except the people keep just sticking them on. But that's not the recommendation, but that's what's happening. Same with the psychiatric. They're meant to be try it for a few months, but if it hasn't corrected it, there's obviously something else to be corrected.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, beautiful. Good luck, Dr. Means. Hope she does a good job.
Well, let's see.
Yeah.
There's let's have hope in the future and hope in the present, because actually
in the present is more important. In the future, who cares? We could be dead. Right. It's like Tucker Carlson said, if what's the worst thing that could happen on the planet? And he said it's probably a nuclear disaster. And what's the point of worrying about that? Because if it happens, we're dead. So what's the next thing you've got worrying?
That's complicated, because one problem with discipline, we're meant to be serving our future self.
Yep.
Right. Except if you cut off the future, Yeah, that's going to be complicated to work
Yeah,
out.
okay. Yeah, my brain isn't there for that one.
No, but we serve our future self and that healthy self in the future, the more we work for that person. Because when we're indulging, whether we're doing drugs or overeating, we're really indulging in the present
Yeah.
and forgetting about our future person.
Yeah, and everything you choose today impacts on your future. So if you choose to start going for a walk every day, if you choose to start drinking purified water, if you choose to throw away those damn plastic bottles and never drink out of them ever again, it will impact positively on your future. There are so many things we can do on a daily basis that are conscious choices that make our health.
So let's be future
better.
thinking, because some of the things that we're dealing with, those
We're
people
future
are,
proofing.
yeah, because those people are living in the past.
Cool. Okay, see you everyone.
Right.